Welcome to a very, very, very exciting UFC 200 Vivisection. Obviously, Connor and I'm joined once again by Connor Rebish, my constant cohort for the UFC Vivisections.
Mm-hmm.
And, we obviously did this show early in the week on the Sherdog Roundtable, essentially, for a marathon slog. And it was really nice, though, because it really set us up for the rest of the week and getting our thoughts more collected and concrete. And it makes going into this UFC 200 card really nice because it feels like nothing's changed. I mean,
it's exciting because it's a big card, not because anything notable has happened in the world of MMA since we did the Sherdog Roundtable. Certainly nothing that would change the face of the event overnight in a drastic and disappointing fashion.
Yeah, not that I've seen or heard. I'm really just, I'm looking forward to talking Cain Velasquez versus Travis Browne.
Sure, all the big fights. Let's run them down. Up the main card. Cain Velasquez versus Travis Browne. Next up,
José Aldo versus Frankie Edgar. What a great fight. What a great fight. Miesha Tate versus Amanda Nunes. Excited for that. Excited for that.
That one is happening.
Brock Lesnar versus Mark Hunt.
3-round fight. Definitely a 3-round fight.
And the big rematch we've all been waiting for. Daniel Cormier versus Patrick Cummins, too.
What a fucking punchline. Oh, God, Zane. What has become of us? What has become of our beloved UFC 200? I do want to say we're gonna run through it all and everything. The card is still fantastic.
Yeah,
it is still a stellar fight card. I don't really care about Lesnar Hunt that much personally because I'm like a dork who really wants like relevant, meaningful fights. So it'll feel like a bit of a letdown to have that as the main event. But this card from top to bottom is all good fights. So we can't act like Jon Jones failing a drug test for whatever substance it may have been.
He can't pronounce it, so we won't know. Apparently, it's one of those unknowable words, like maybe some Lovecraftian shit that like
he's afraid of what will be summoned if he pronounces those archaic syllables. So the card is still good. It's not a shambles now that Jones is no longer there and that Cormier is no longer there. We can worry about the aftermath. That's going to be the really big blow, I think. Like, it sucks not to have this fight on this card, but the really big blow is going to be, is Jones out for 2 years? Does Daniel Cormier never get the chance to redeem himself against Jon Jones? Does it taint the legacy of one of the greatest guys to ever step into the cage? That will be, we can deal with that later. We still have some good fights to break down here today.
One last thought. I do just want to say this. If this all ends up being some tainted supplement and Jon Jones gets like a 6-month suspension, fuck that so much. The idea of losing this fight on this card over a tainted supplement, like I don't even, people are gonna be like, well, he should know what he's putting in his body. Supplement industry is god awful. And yet a lot of athletes are beholden to them because you can't just spend your whole day spooning peanut butter into your mouth while you're working out. And if this shit happens, getting a card like that, a fight like that pulled apart at the last minute over a tainted supplement would just fuck that. I hate it. I hate it to the core. And obviously, as somebody who's never really been on board with the stricter drug testing idea, I've got a lot of other reasons to hate it. But that especially would just be kind of a coffin nail for me of just hate. Mm-hmm. On that note, let's jump straight into Jim Miller versus Takanori Gomi.
Let's jump in there. What a good place to start.
At the beginning.
At the beginning, Zane. At the beginning. And let's run down this card and note how it's exactly the same. And then we can discuss the amazing rematch between Daniel Cormier and whatever ex-wrestling barista they happen to find in a 10-mile perimeter of Vegas this weekend. Am I going first here?
You are going first. That's the way it works.
Well, Jim Miller, Takanori Gomi. I say they're all great fights. This one has a tinge of sadness running through it because these are two great fighters, great exciting fighters who are definitely nearing the ends of their impressive careers. Takanori Gomi more so than Jim Miller because Gomi in his prime was the greatest lightweight on the planet and is one of the greatest lightweights today of all time. He had an amazing run that I think stacks up with like the 2011 of John Jones. And the 2007 of Shogun Hua, those great runs that we talk about. Gomi had one of those, and it's been a long, hard fall for him. Now he's 37 years old, same as Daniel Cormier, and that's very old for a lightweight. The small guys tend to get hit more, and for whatever reason, they just don't tend to live as long. It's like the opposite of dogs and horses. Like big dogs only live a couple years, and little dogs just never stop yapping into eternity. And for people, it's different. They mature later when they're bigger. And so Gomi is very past his prime. He's still dangerous for Jim Miller. The thing with Gomi is that he's a wild man. He's unpredictable. His style has always been very eccentric, and he hits very hard. But the really big thing is that since his defense has dwindled over the past few years, he really needs his chin. And his last two fights kind of revealed that the chin is no longer there either. So what can he do against Jim Miller, who while he did have kind of a stinker against Diego Sanchez, has still put on some pretty decent performances in recent years? Jim Miller can land good punches. He is not at all a bad striker. He can wrestle fairly well. He has obviously a very dangerous submission game. He doesn't tend to lose to guys in Takanori Gomi's position. In fact, against other action fighters, Jim Miller tends to come out looking pretty good, like when he fought Joe Lauzon and pretty much dominated him. So I kind of have to pick Jim Miller here. Gomi definitely has a chance because he has that power. But if it's a story of two guys with so-so defense connecting first, then it's got to be Jim Miller. And if it's a story of two guys on the ground, then it's definitely got to be Jim Miller. He just has all the clear paths to victory in this fight.
Yeah, it's also worth noting here that the only time in his career that Jim Miller has ever been knocked out was when Donald Cerrone dialed him up. So, still to this day, Jim Miller has only got one knockout loss. And that Diego Sanchez fight, that fight was so awful. But for the middle round of it, Jim Miller still looked fantastic. He actually, in that middle round, is like, this is why I didn't pick Diego Sanchez, because Jim Miller just horsed Diego Sanchez around the cage and beat him up for a round. It was just bookended by a incredibly slow start and incredibly slow finish.
And against anybody else, Jim Miller probably would have won the first round too, because Sanchez won it by taking him down, and Sanchez has great jiu-jitsu. Despite all of his shortcomings, he's unsubmittable, and most people aren't against Jim Miller.
Yeah, and so, and even going back to his win over Danny Castillo in 2015, that was a good, strong, solid win. Mm-hmm. Castillo may be fading a bit too, but certainly Gomi is way on the other end of fading from that.
Yeah.
Gomi's, his last win was Isaac Valley Flag in 2014, and Isaac Valley Flag and Mac Danzig via somewhat close decisions. That just doesn't speak well for where he is right now. Every time that Gomi is won big, it feels like lightning in a bottle, whereas Jim Miller, I still can reasonably, I don't know. I trust him to be tough and to fight hard, whether things are working for him or not. And Gomi, I think the quote I really now remember from Gomi was him saying, if I could, it was something like, if I get a title shot, I'll quit drinking. and I think that says a lot about where Gomi, a lot more about where Gomi is right now than you might like it to say.
Yeah. Yep. That pretty much, that sums it up better than any amount of technical analysis.
So Gomi is the underdog, plus 225 down to plus 175. Jim Miller, the favorite, minus 227 up to minus 285. That's That feels reasonable to me. I don't think Jim Miller can be much higher than that at this point in his career, but it's really like I would have to see Gomi show up and actually look good before I was prepared to start picking him to win a fight.
Definitely. Right, pretty much against anyone except like an absolute person who was there maybe on a Japan show to give him a win.
And like I say, even in his recent wins, that Danzig and the Valley Flag win, Gomi did not look good.
No.
He just looked like he was somehow, it was sort of like he looked drunk and able to stay, like that drunk guy you see on the street who like is almost going to fall down, but never quite manages to fall down. That's how Gomi has looked in his recent wins, where you're like, oh my God, is he going to tip over suddenly? Is he going to tip over? Is he going to tip over? And he never falls down. And you're like, yes, somehow he managed to stay upright, and thus he is the winner.
And then in his next two fights, he fell down.
Yeah.
he had another drink or two, and he really fell down.
Yeah. So I'm not picking Gomi there. That brings us to, assuming it's still happening, we don't know what the fallout of this DC thing is going to be yet. So Mousasi may not be in this fight with Thiago Moreta Santos, but assuming that he is, that brings us to Gegard Mousasi versus Thiago Santos. In a fight that really, I don't know, it has me feeling very split.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't feel like Mousasi is going to get caught out by Santos the same way he did by Hall, because I don't think Santos is as unpredictable. I think Santos is powerful and he's fast, and he can really surprise people early with that power and speed. But I don't think he's as unpredictable, and I don't necessarily trust him to be able to keep that game working to the effect that he did against Teodoro, against somebody who's a much better range striker than Teodoro. Mm-hmm. Somebody who can really work a lot better defensively and offensively to stay safe and land his own shots. I still feel like Santos, like his striking has become better, his boxing has become better, but he still tends to kick, and like he'll kick, and then when he gets a chance, he'll just kind of come in with his chin on line, swarming with these punches that really leaves him open to get hit and return. And the fact that he's strong and fast, he tries to just overwhelm people with that sudden burst of athleticism. And I feel like Mousasi's too crafty for that still. I feel like this is Santos's next, like that first bump up that ends up being a bump back, or I guess the next bump up that ends up being a bump back since the Uriah Hall fight. And if he gets past it, great, awesome, that'd be amazing. But I don't see it quite yet. I think that I haven't seen Mousasi. Mousasi's still too tough to me, and still delivers too many of the things that he's always delivered, and is still too consistent for me to pick Mousasi to lose.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. Like you, this feels like a real pick'em fight for me. It's one where I can see advantages for both guys. I think for me, the difference between like a couple of things you said, Gegard Mousasi definitely more technically sound, more savvy than a guy like Elias Theodorou, but not nearly as aggressive. I think that throughout his career, Mousasi has kind of shown a tendency to not always be a stellar round winner. In the past, Gegard Mousasi has been outworked, out-wrestled, even in fights where it looked like he clearly won, like the Keith Jardine fight in Strikeforce, which was inexplicably a draw. Even in that fight, there was a lot of Mousasi working from bad positions and just kind of doing well without asserting himself the way other more traditionally trained fighters might. And I kind of have the theory about guys like Mousasi that they are masterful gamesmen. It's kind of like the Black Murderers Row thing for modern day mixed martial artists, where these guys who start young and they have long careers and tons of fights, and they travel all over the place, often fighting on short notice and like taking random kickboxing matches and grappling tournaments and whatever comes their way. They tend to be really, really good at surviving and at stifling but not always so great at winning rounds. And I know that sounds crazy because Gegard Mousasi is 38-6. He has won the vast, vast majority of all of his fights, but so has Jorge Masvidal. And to me, this fight feels kind of like Jorge Masvidal, Lorenz Larkin. Another fight which ended up being...
you picked against Masvidal.
What's that?
You picked Masvidal, and I picked Larkin.
I did, and now that's why I think
in that fight.
And that's why I think I'm going the other way now, because like seeing that fight, I was like, yeah, the craft and everything. But afterwards, I kind of realized, like, you don't have to be technically better than guys with this sort of trait to beat them. You have to be strategically better. You have to know how to take rounds. And I think Santos showed the ability to do that against Teodoro. And I still don't know if Mousasi's dominant first round over Uriah Hall was because Mousasi's wrestling is that amazing now, or because it's Uriah Hall and he just can't manage to do anything with consistency. You know, it's just not easy for him. Santos's wrestling looks really solid. He's at ATT now, and they never have a problem turning out guys with great takedown defense. And the kicking game at range, I just kind of feel like this will be like a less technical but more damaging Lyoto Machida fight for Gegard Mousasi, where he's going to be competitive in every single round. He's going to score shots, but his inability to do as much damage from distance, his inability to be quite so comfortable throwing power shots at long range, that's going to be what gives Santos 2 or 3 rounds. It's a tough one.
Man, I hope that all recorded on the other side of this thing, because to me it came through super choppy. So if for viewers at home it did not come through well, I apologize. I got the gist of what you said, but you had a lot of the robot breaking up.
Connor picked Thiago Santos. I suppose that's the important part.
Yeah, I would say the other part of that, though, of the Lorenz Larkin Jorge Masvidal fight, that dichotomy is that Lorenz Larkin had to lose a whole hell of a lot to get to the point where he could win fights like that.
Sure.
And that's kind of, I think, where I am still with is like at that point where he still might lose to the Brad Tavareses of the world, like Lorenz Larkin did. Although Tavares, it seems like a worse fighter than he was at the time. But whatever. You know, it just guys like Larkin has eventually shown, as the problems that he had early in his career have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, and Thiago Santos is somewhere on that continuum. He has shored up a lot, started with, but I'm not sure how far along he is on.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. I am sure.
Yeah. Odds on that fight, Mousasi is the favorite, -9, up 300. Thiago Santos, underdog, +231, down to +210. I do feel like those odds are long. I think that there's a lot to be said for the idea that Mousasi is just not consistently trustworthy against dangerous, aggressive fighters. And we also don't he has looked more like a wrestling heavy fighter, aggressive fighters, in a way that, I don't know, it could make him less of the kind of round winning star he formerly was.
Right.
I don't know. Like there's something unsafe about Mousasi here that and especially I think there's something with Thiago Santos that makes me feel like seeing Mousasi near -3 or up around -300 even as very long odds, longer than they should be.
Mousasi's the kind of guy where it feels weird to almost to ever have him at odds like that. You know, he's just he's kind of famous for his unreliability.
Exactly. And even when he wins consistently, he rarely looks super dominant winning. He's not the kind of fighter that just goes out and absolutely bell to bell dominates somebody unless he's wrestle grappling Costa Philippou it through the mat.
Yeah. And Thiago Santos is not Costa's
Oh,
Philippou.
no. Philippou seemed like he just hated to wrestle and abandoned it the moment he left Serra-Longo.
Yep.
That brings us to Diego Sanchez versus Joe Lauzon.
Well, I thought I was crazy when the evidence convinced me that this was Diego Sanchez's fight to lose, but based on everyone else I've talked to, pretty much everyone is picking Diego Sanchez here, which is crazy because if people who watch this show regularly will recall, we very clearly stated that we would never pick Diego Sanchez again. And also, I think that we never wanted to see him fight again, that it just wasn't enjoyable to watch him fight anymore going into the Jim Miller fight. And then he won, and we were kind of reminded of the quality of fighters to which Diego Sanchez has been losing and the kind of attributes he still possesses. Diego Sanchez is not nearly as good as he once was. He has lost many, many steps, but he still has a few crucial things. One, the most important attribute for any combat athlete, he is durable as all hell. The man has never been knocked out. He stopped on cuts against BJ Penn, but other than that, he has never been knocked out despite facing a litany of dangerous strikers. He's still difficult to hurt, and he is nigh impossible to finish. Two, his jiu-jitsu is still very solid, and he has done more wrestling lately to enable it. And so on the ground, Diego Sanchez, though he's not much of a submission artist, he can definitely control you and protect himself from your counters, your sweeps, and your submissions from the bottom. And then three, I just think overall his style is a consistent one. You know what you're going to get from Diego Sanchez. He's going to put on a ton of pressure. He's going to throw a lot of punches. He's going to latch onto your hips and try to control you from top position and maybe go for a rare submission in the scramble. That's a consistent approach. That is a round winning style. There's process to that. He may not be the same athlete or like a very clever tactical fighter to complement that, but there is a clear strategic process to the way that Diego Sanchez fights. And there is not one to Joe Lauzon.
No.
Not at all. Lauzon is not only just kind of a wild man who is definitely a dangerous striker and, of course, very dangerous on the ground, but he tends to give up position in all sorts of ways going for his finishes. And then you add to that the fact that he's never been comfortable striking with southpaws. Some of his worst losses have been to southpaws. And then you add that to the fact that most of his losses come when he is forced to go past the midpoint of the second round. Joe Lauzon works at a really crazy pace, and he has no notion of energy conservation because he wants to scramble you into oblivion and submit you. And when he can't do that against Diego Sanchez, which I would be very surprised, even with Joe Lauzon, I'd be very surprised if Sanchez was submitted here because he is that crafty on the ground. He's just very, very solid with his jiu-jitsu. Then that means that Joe Lauzon's going to have to go to a decision with Diego Sanchez. And Joe Lauzon's not very good at winning those. And Diego's pretty good at winning them, even when he doesn't actually win them. So I think I have to pick Diego.
Yeah, I was actually about to tell you a very funny stat. In Joe Lauzon's, 36 fight career with 25 wins, do you know how many decisions he's won?
I'm going to guess 2.
Nope. 1. 1 decision, and it was over Mac Danzig in 2013. And that his lone decision win in his entire career.
How many decision losses?
He has lost 4 decision losses. He tends to be a live by the sword, die by the sword fighter. So usually when Joe Lauzon is losing, he's getting finished. But
yeah. So it is possible. It is possible that Sanchez finishes him. He's still
but this has decision win for Diego Sanchez all over. Probably split decision win for Diego Sanchez all over it.
Basically, the story of Joe Lauzon's career is he wins early or he doesn't win.
Yep. And Sanchez, the will is still there. I don't know if you saw his presser videos, the scrum videos from him that have been going around for the past 24 hours. He looks and sounds totally insane to the maximum Diego Sanchez effect.
I did see his recreation of the yes cartwheels for Ariel Helwani.
See, yeah, no, like I think Mike Bond posted a short clip of his Diego Sanchez interview, and it was like a 30-second Diego Sanchez promo of like, I'm leaner than ever, I'm meaner than ever, and you're gonna see like it's just like this like super wide eyed like and pointing, very that kind of Diego Sanchez. So
walking out with a cross, Diego Sanchez.
yeah, he looks as intense and crazy as ever. I think that we've seen in the cage he has more trouble pulling the trigger on his strikes than he used to, which is just kind of what happens as fighters get older. We tend to see that. But he's going to pressure fight. He's going to go after Joe Lauzon. And Lauzon's going to give him the opportunities. And it's really hard to see. It's hard to see Lauzon finishing him. And then it's easy to see a very close, ugly, scrappy fight where Diego Sanchez is just regularly getting the position, regularly, even if he's landing fewer shots or landing just as many, marching forward and like throwing in volume as much as he can and doing enough to take points. And that just kind of has that's how this fight feels. So
it's also very likely that he loses the first round and wins the last two.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, that could happen. Although Diego Sanchez is not a terribly slow starter to my memory.
No, I'm just saying because he is hittable and Joe Lauzon has knocked down many tough fighters in his time. I can see it happening.
Yeah, Lauzon is a good swarming striker, but his last knockout was like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Kyle Bradley in 2008 was the last KO for Joe Lauzon.
He hurts.
No. He knocked out Never mind. He knocked out Takanori Gomi last year.
That's true. That's true. He also stunned Melvin Gillard before submitting him in 2011. He's knocked down a few people since then, but he usually does have to finish with the sub.
Yeah, and Diego Sanchez is just impossible to finish. I mean, I would say impossible to submit, but he's impossible to knock out too. So, and we haven't seen signs of that changing. Sanchez has fought more dangerous fighters even than Lauzon lately. Guys like Ricardo Lamas, and even to some respect Ross Pearson, but Miles Jury and Gilbert Melendez, and they haven't finished him. So,
yeah, I mean, this could be the fight where it happens. Like Diego Sanchez can't keep eating punches like biscuits forever, but until I see it, I'm just going to say Diego Sanchez can take a goddamn punch.
Yeah, and I don't pick at some point it will happen. But I of all the fights I would have picked, I thought it would be Ricardo Lamas that would knock him cold. And if Lamas didn't, I'm not picking Lauzon to do it. Mm-hmm. Odds on this are basically dead even. Diego Sanchez is a very slight underdog, plus 100 down to minus 115. Joe Lauzon, very slight favorite, minus 110 down to minus 120. I would not bet on this fight. I would not bet on Diego Sanchez. I would not bet on Joe Lauzon. I would not bet on any results because even as tough as Sanchez is to finish, like I say, we are kind of waiting for that bomb to drop where he just gets starched and can't eat everything. But I am a little surprised to see Sanchez as an underdog here.
It only surprises me given the fact that everyone I told about picking Diego Sanchez agreed, because my feeling going into the fight was Diego Sanchez is completely done and Joe Lauzon's a crazy action fighter. And then I watched and I looked at their records and I came to the conclusion that Diego Sanchez is a smart pick. But if everyone agrees that that's the smart pick, then why are the odds this way? I don't know.
Yeah. I could see it being the exact same but opposite, where Sanchez is the slight favorite and Lauzon is the very slight underdog.
It's probably because people like to put their money on finishers, people who have a good chance of finishing the fight at any time, and that is definitely more Lauzon than it is Sanchez.
Oh, absolutely. Sanchez is not a finisher at this point.
He never really has been.
No, he never really has been. All right, and that brings us to the fight or the Fox Sports 1 prelims and Sage Northcutt versus Enrique Marin. And this is, to me, just the right fight for Sage Northcutt. I think the UFC got their wake-up call of not pushing their Wunderkid through like as many fights as possible, no matter what condition he's in.
They didn't, Zane. They didn't. They gave him this fight, but as soon as he wins this, he's going to be fighting Tony Ferguson or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. I know, but I'd like to think they got their wake up call. But they're at the very least, they're like, okay, let's step back and give him, not the worst lightweight on the roster. I don't want to be. I mean, Enrique Marin, partially, I just want to be like, fighters that train out of Spain. I don't know if you've watched a lot of European regional MMA, but Spanish fighters tend to be the dudes that get brought into Russia to get beat up by local Russian fighters.
Yeah. There's like a slave trade in just Spanish journeymen.
Yeah, like they have a somewhat active MMA scene, but it feels very much behind the curve, you know. I mean, and this dude's training out of crazy Sevilla, so
all their best athletes are soccer players and matadors, so there's no one left for MMA.
That's right. Although you would think that the matadors would actually like make pretty good fighters once they retired, like that seems like it would translate really well.
They would make like Anderson Silva style, because like bullfighting is like all about flair.
And footwork.
Flair, footwork, it's also dangerous because it's about taking risk. The more risk you incur, the more impressive your survival. So
but
they would be fun.
Hopefully that's an untapped resource for the future of MMA is the bullfighter crossover.
I'm going to start bringing in bullfighting examples in my analysis and drawing the comparisons like I do with fencing and boxing.
Which is weird because that's like sort of like analysis, like really crap analysis 101 is bullfighting.
Yeah, it really is. It's the easiest goddamn metaphor for any defensive fighter.
But anyway, I mean, I just kind of remember that Montano fight. Marin's one of those, like, he's a submission artist off the regional scene, which is once immediately kind of a strike against him for me.
Yeah, it's a red flag.
It's a red flag. Guys who really base their whole career off the submission tend to struggle when they get to the higher levels. And in that Montano fight, like, we saw a fighter in Montano who was too sloppy and inconsistent to beat Marin as badly as he could. But it just felt like every time Marin got hit, it was way, way, way harder than when Montano got hit. And there's just kind of a fragility to him that I feel like a much, much, much better athlete in Sage Northcutt can just bomb on him. Especially if Sage, I mean, the only big liability here is if Sage Northcutt throws him to the ground and then like gets caught up in a stupid guard game and gets armbarred, which could happen, but I wouldn't.
Or ends up on his back, which he has not looked good from that position.
True, but I don't think Marin has the wrestling to put him there. Marin, like, you look at his record too, and he's got some like arm bars and triangles. And
I was thinking more of like a sweep after being taken down.
True, but yeah. So I gotta pick Northcutt here. He could get. I could see him easily getting arm barred by Enrique Marin, but I am much more putting on the train of him just bombing away in the first round and knocking him out.
Yeah, Northcutt's walking a sort of tightrope because he's so so specialized for what he does well. Like Northcutt is this brilliant natural transitional fighter who hits hard and has good timing for his takedowns and just has very little else to his game. And has a complement of like karate kicks and stuff like that, but he's still the kind of fighter. He's young and inexperienced, so he can be scared off. He can be made to lose confidence in himself, and he can run out of ideas very quickly. He doesn't have enough nuance and depth to the things that he does know to vary them over the course of 3 rounds. He's just a guy utterly used to blowing people out of the water in the first 3 minutes of a fight. And Enrique Marin, he kind of has a Brian Barberena-esque style, but he lacks basically all the things that make Brian Barberena so effective. He's not as powerful. He's not as durable. He's not as good on the defense. He's not as overwhelming in the clinch, and he's not, I don't think, as good on the ground as Bryan Barberena. And so,
yeah,
basically he has a chance to, when taken down or knocked down, to submit Sage Northcutt. Still a very real chance given how raw Northcutt is, but it's not the kind of chance you can pick a fight on. So I too have to side with Sage.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Barberena, in his fights against both Warlley Alves and Sage Northcutt, did get a bit shit kicked in the beginning of both of those fights.
That's Barberena's thing.
Yeah, it's his intense durability that rode him through that. So if you say Bryan Barberena without the durability, yeah,
it's not a great look.
No, it's not. Yeah.
By the way, I think losing to either of the Montano brothers, and I don't mean any disrespect to them, though of course I can't avoid it. Losing to either of them, you are officially not very good. Not yet, at least. Like, they're just not. Eric Montano is not even as bad as Augusto, and he's just not that good, man.
No.
Like, his game is not there.
They are the kind of regional fighters who are. I mean, they're quadruple A fighters. Frankly, they really dominate on a really lackluster regional scene, and then you step them up to a bigger league, and a lot of the pieces of their game are just missing.
And Eric didn't even dominate on the regional scene.
Yeah, that's true.
He lost 3 of his fights.
Yeah, it's they're the kind of reason that you don't always look at. They're the reason that people talk about Tough as like, oh, we don't get any talent off Tough, while in the same time, like right now we're getting Khalil Roundtree and Andrew Sanchez, and then people are like, oh, but Tough sucks because Eric Montano.
Because Perry, the nickname Perry says it all. Yeah. That's how great he is. And that is, I rescind what I said yesterday. That's worse than remember the name. Perry is not a nickname. It's awful.
All right. We've done enough damage here. Northcutt is the heavy favorite, minus 278 to minus 400. Enrique Marin plus 284 down to plus 210. Enrique Marin wins by submission is plus 825. I might throw a nickel on that.
Maybe like a $1 just to get $8.50 back.
$1, not a big bet. Because I do not think Marin wins this fight. But if he wins it, he almost certainly wins it by submission. Mm-hmm. And there is a chance he can do that. And at plus 825, like, those are very.
It's Northcutt's most likely way to lose. It's Marin's most likely way to win.
Yep.
There's something there.
There's something there. Not a lot, but a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Do not be fooled into like, oh, well, the odds are so big and I could win so much. No. That is why the odds are so big.
That's what they want.
They want to sucker you into wasting, $5. But I think there's a little bit of advantage there. A little. And that brings us, weirdly, I can't believe that brings us to this, but it brings us to TJ Dillashaw versus Raphael Assunção.
Which feels like it should be on the main card.
Yeah.
Is this me?
Yeah, this is you.
Well, people who read my piece after the fight know that I thought TJ Dillashaw beat Dominic Cruz. I'm not pissed off about the decision. It was obviously, I think everyone could acknowledge, an extremely close fight and a fantastic fight. That is easily one of my favorite fights I've ever seen in MMA. But the best version of Dominic Cruz we've ever seen came back and defied the odds, and yet TJ Dillashaw was with him all the way. And I think that says a lot about how good TJ Dillashaw is, because Dominic Cruz is one of the best to ever do it. Probably the best bantamweight of all time, right? I mean, I don't think anybody else deserves the distinction. And his last loss was to Raphael Assunção, who is one of my very favorite fighters. So needless to say, I love this fight. Big fan of both of these guys. I lament the fact that Assunção has to come back from a 2-year layoff, nearly 2 years, to fight TJ Dillashaw, who is just getting better and better, because Assunção is great. He's very good and very underrated. His win streak is one of, if not the best win streaks in this division. It's not as good as Dominic Cruz's, but outside of the champion, it's one of the best win streaks in the division. He's beaten a lot of good guys: Pedro Munoz, TJ Dillashaw, Brian Caraway, a lot of good fighters on there. And he's a great counterpuncher. He's got really good footwork. He is very difficult to take down. He's very dangerous on the ground. His ground and pound is super dangerous, complemented by the fact that he has great top position jiu-jitsu and submissions to go with that. But I think all the things he struggled with from Dillashaw last time are just going to be worse here. Assunção destroyed his ankle multiple times in training and had to have surgery on it. That's why his last fight was canceled. And was he supposed to fight Uriah Faber? He was. He would have beaten Uriah Faber, damn it. I swear he would have. And so now he's been out for 2 years, and Dillashaw had a fight recently in which he looked really good. Now he's been traveling around the country, around the continent, training at places like TriStar and Jackson Winklejohn, in addition to with Dwayne Ludwig and his team at Elevation, which now includes Joe Benavidez, which is a fantastic training partner to have. And yeah,
so somehow that those lack of training partners that he would be losing at Team Alpha Male.
Somehow you don't have to have this insane sense of loyalty to a team that is technically making 10% of your paycheck each time in order to have good training partners.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Dillashaw, I mean, he's going to have the kicking game. He's going to have the pressuring. He's going to have better footwork than he did the last time. And let it not be forgotten that in their first fight, Dillashaw very nearly choked Assunção out after taking him down. So he does have a wrestling advantage. And it's hard to imagine any of these things going away. You kind of feel like Assunção is slightly lucky that it's a 3-round fight, because if it was a 5-rounder, we know how dangerous Dillashaw is when he has the chance to really pile up the damage. To Assunção's credit, he's very good defensively, but yeah, I have to pick TJ Dillashaw. I've said that I've been compelled with each of my picks so far. I realize I keep saying I have to pick, but that's because the fights are so hard to pick. There's some really difficult predictions to make on this whole undercard, and this is, this one is not so hard to pick from a logical perspective. But I just love Raphael Assunção so much, Zane. It sucks to pick against him, so I want an out. I have to do it, Raphael. Okay, it wasn't my idea.
Yeah, Assunção is one of those dudes that, like, I feel like in the history of the sport and people following the sport and fandom, like, he's just going to be this kind of forgotten figure where nobody's going to have ever paid any attention to him and his game, and it's really too bad because he's got this fun, like, tight volume boxing game, and then and it's good enough that he's, for a lot of fights, he's been able to force opponents to then say, like, well, okay, I'll grapple with this guy.
I'm going to grapple with the jiu-jitsu black belt.
Yeah, and then he's a fantastic aggressive grappler and ground and pound specialist. Unfortunately, like, one of the biggest faults for Raphael Assunção has been he likes to switch stance a lot, and he is notably way worse out of one stance.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to remember which one it is. Is he a natural southpaw or a natural orthodox fighter?
I think he's better as a righty.
Yeah, he's not better as a righty, but he spends a ton of time fighting out of southpaw, and pretty much every fight he has, like, if you watch it, the moment he switches to southpaw, he starts getting hit and he stops, like, dominating the striking battle.
You don't want to play the stance switching game with TJ Dillashaw either.
No, especially not if you're going to give off cues that you're notably worse out of one stance than another. Switching to that stance a couple of times against Dillashaw, he's going to start to eat that up. And
Dillashaw's probably the best switch hitter in the sport right now.
Yeah. And that, I think, is really where, like, one of the major points where I feel like Assunção is going to have problems, especially, too, because we don't know, coming off this ankle injury, like, how much is he going to trust that leg? How mobile is he going to feel? If he turns his ankle at some point in the fight, is he just suddenly spend the rest of the fight thinking about it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just, those are the kind of questions we ask about Anderson Silva after he destroyed his leg. And you can't just say these questions don't matter or they'll be able to push through it. You hope they will and you hope they don't, but I don't know. And after as much time as he's had out, just coming right back in against Dillashaw, I don't see it. And, you know, like, there's a pretty heavy argument out there, too, that the first time they fought, Dillashaw won that time, too.
Yeah, very close.
And so Dillashaw has made large, marked improvements since then. And I haven't seen that out of Assunção. I feel like Assunção is more or less the same fighter. It's a very good fighter. It's a top 5 fighter. But I feel like Dillashaw can prepare for the same guy he fought last time and do better against him. And I don't think that Assunção has the same room. I don't feel like he can, like, oh, I remember fighting this guy. I'll prepare for that same guy again. And he will find somebody totally different in front of him.
Yeah.
So, odds on this fight are TJ Dillashaw is the heavy favorite, -372 to -415. Assunção is the underdog, +342 to +270. I want to say those odds are very wide because Assunção is a very good fighter, but Assunção's only career KOs come against some guy named Chris Clark,
and Eric Koch,
Joe Pearson, and Issei Tamura. Koch KO'd him.
Oh, you mean his KO wins?
His KO wins.
Yeah.
Issei Tamura, Joe Pearson, and Chris Clark. As decent a volume striker as Assunção is, he is not a power striker. He's not going to take you apart and really hurt you on the feet. And if he's not really going to hurt you and put you away, if he's not going to hurt Dillashaw and put him away there, I don't see him getting a submission. Like, I don't see Dillashaw letting that happen. His top game, it
really feels like it's utterly Dillashaw's decision where this fight takes place.
Yeah. And so despite the odds being as long as they are, I can't really argue with it because it's hard to talk your way through on a Assunção win.
Yeah. If it weren't for the layoff, man, if it had happened like right after their first fight, or if it had happened right before the Cruz fight, I would have said, you know, Assunção, man, he had a really close fight with Dillashaw last time, and he's really dangerous and really crafty, but this layoff and the injuries and Dillashaw improving while Assunção's been out and healing, it's just too much for him.
Yeah. And that brings us to Johny Hendricks versus Kelvin Gastelum. And this is such a weird-ass fight to me. Like, I don't know. I get it, and I don't like it that much. Like, I'm going to really like watching it. It's going to be an awesome fight to watch because Hendricks is not going to sit back and wait to see what Gastelum does.
Could be terrible, though. There's a slim chance it could be. My expectation is that it'll be amazing, but it could be Johny Hendricks trying to take down Kelvin Gastelum unsuccessfully while Kelvin Gastelum does very little to stop him other than sprawling. That could happen.
I kind of feel, I don't know, like, is Johny Hendricks ever really that one note?
No, but for both of these guys, they either have really good fights or really unimpressive ones. Like, I don't think there's really any middle ground.
I'm trying to remember the last time that Johny Hendricks looked unimpressive in a fight where he didn't just get shit kicked. Like,
yeah, it's true.
You know, Stephen Thompson shit kicked him. And then I guess the other, I mean, like, the thing with Hendricks has been classically that he fades as the fight goes on. Like, that's been his weird trouble. And that's what hit him with Carlos Condit. But I don't think that Hendricks looked unimpressive early in the Condit fight. He just, as he faded, it became clear that if this were a 5-round fight, Condit could very well win it. True.
He never looks unimpressive early.
So, my feeling of Hendricks is that he's going to start strong. Like, I don't expect him to put on a bad show, whether it's changing up takedowns and strikes. Like, in the Stephen Thompson fight, he tried to wade straight into the pocket and just throw hands. And I expect him to have much more success doing that with Gastelum, who really still tends to be like firing one shot at a time. Maybe if he really feels like he can dominate, he'll throw out a 2 or 3 piece combo. but he has to be feeling really comfortable in his athletic advantages for that to happen. Like, we haven't seen that really since well, I mean, I guess we saw some of that in the Marquardt fight, but a lot more of that was positional advantage, where he was just kind of taking Marquardt down and working him over against the cage and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of like remembering a really great highlight Gastelum combo outside of his Melanson fight, and I'm sure there have been ones, because he's fought good fights against Rick Story and Nico Musoke, and he beat Jake Ellenberger, but a lot of that I'm just kind of remembering a very physically dominant fighter.
Yeah. Well, I think that's overall kind of Gastelum's thing. Is like he's an overwhelmer, or he's overwhelmed.
Yeah. And I feel a lot safer picking Hendricks to overwhelm than to be overwhelmed here, because I mean, Gastelum, I just don't see still the depth of craft that can do what Stephen Thompson did. Like, I don't see that depth of craft. And other than that, like, you have Robbie Lawler and GSP, and those are fights that Hendricks arguably won. Like, even that depth of craft, Hendricks arguably beat them both.
Yeah.
So without the rangy kickboxing game to just snipe Hendricks constantly, Gastelum's a fighter who the two times he's really got that step up into the elite, he's fallen. And it wasn't even, I mean, they were close, questionable fights, but it wasn't like, oh, it's really nip-tuck and Gastelum is going back and forth and all that. They just ended up being these really cautious slogs where Gastelum was sort of failing despite himself. And
in some sort of strange, ironic twist, Gastelum's losses have looked like Uriah Hall's loss to him in the TUF finale.
Yeah.
Like, just kind of uninspired. Like, he didn't show up.
And I feel like Hendricks is exactly the kind of fighter, like, if Tyron Woodley can make Gastelum not show up, although that was also on a bad weight cut, but so there's some other shit going on there. But I feel like Hendricks can do it. I don't trust Gastelum to win this big a fight yet.
Yeah, I think the really salient point that you made was about Gastelum's level of depth. I think that Gastelum, when he has won, he has fought in a way like he has a ton of confidence that isn't necessarily deserved.
Yeah.
Like when he fought Rick Story, Kelvin Gastelum was striking like he was a super experienced striker, but Story was able to tag him and hurt him several times because he's open. He's not that great defensively. He gets his feet out of position. And even with those things, he just doesn't always know what to do. It's not all about having ironclad technique. There have been a lot of great fighters with weird or shoddy technique who just know how all the pieces fit together for them individually. And Gastelum doesn't have that yet. And so then his losses have looked like ones where his opponent has actually made him realize that he has that lacking depth, where he has struggled to pull the trigger like he really did against Magny, when I think Magny's length really startled him, that he'd never faced a fighter with that much of a physical advantage over him. And without his physical advantage, he didn't feel that he had enough technique to attack. And I think the same thing against Tyron Woodley, good defensively, very strong, hard hitter. He made Gastelum, even though Gastelum pressured for a lot of that fight, he couldn't pull the trigger. He just couldn't, just like in the Magny fight, he wasn't confident doing that. And Johny Hendricks isn't that great of a technical striker in every area, but he does know how his pieces go together. He knows how to work off of his jab. He knows how to throw combinations. He knows how to counter. He's fairly hittable still. He can be hit, especially after he counters, when he kind of overextends. He too will get past his own feet, and that's how Stephen Thompson hurt him. But he's pretty damn good in a firefight. And he's pretty damn good when it's not a firefight and he's dominating. And both of those are really the options for Kelvin Gastelum. It's hard for me to see Gastelum having some way to overwhelm Hendricks the way he usually does when he wins. So it's either him slugging it out with Hendricks, or it's him doing like he did against Tyron Woodley and letting Hendricks dictate the fight. And I think Johny Hendricks stands a better chance of winning those two. There is, of course, the chance that Hendricks is on the decline. He's not that young. He had a long wrestling career. He was just knocked out pretty brutally, granted for the first time, but with guys who absorb a lot of punishment over the course of their careers and who rely on their chins, as Hendricks has in quite a few fights, that knockout often presages a lot of knockouts to come. So I feel okay accepting the idea that for now it was just a one-off thing. Stephen Thompson is just that good and that tough of a matchup for Hendricks. But it wouldn't shock me to see Gastelum spark Hendricks out. That would not be an utter surprise. Now
no, I could easily see Hendricks wade into the pocket, open, expecting to be able to put together some these really sharp sort of weird Dutch combos he puts together where he's punch kicking and just absolutely get hammered by a counter and put out. But like I said, like we've said, we've seen him in fights, 2 fights now with Robbie Lawler where that didn't happen. So it's hard.
Gastelum's a lot more Robbie Lawler than he is Stephen Thompson. He's not Robbie Lawler either. But if you got to compare him to one, it's the guy who stands toe-to-toe in trades or the guy who has long bouts of inactivity, not the guy who picks you apart like a pro from long range.
Yeah, so. And and it should also be noted in that fight against Thompson, like Hendricks got hurt a little. And then it was just sort of like, he didn't just go right out. It was this idea of like, oh, well, I got to keep going forward. I'm going to keep pressuring and keep pushing. And every time he tried to take a step forward, it's like he got sniped again right in the same spots over and over. And it was just a build-up knock. It was like, it was a clean KO, but it built up. It wasn't just like one shot and out. It was one shot, little bit hurt, then 2 more shots, really hurt, and then 5 more shots, and suddenly he's out.
He went down straight Boromir style, Zane.
Yeah.
17 arrows riddling his corpse as he fell to the ground. I don't think he was doing it for any of his Hobbit friends, but I can't confirm that he was not. So I'm going to assume that there were some heroic intentions involved.
I gotta say, if ever a team seemed like it was cut straight from Lord of the Rings, Team Takedown, like the Jared Rosholt and
Jared Rosholt for sure. Although Johnny's not at Team Takedown anymore. Team Takedown.
Oh, that's right.
Team Takedown is no more. The Fellowship is broken, Zane. The Fellowship is broken.
All right. Well, for a time, big beardy guys really seemed to collect there, and that the Lord of the Rings thing felt like it could be apt. But now that that's passed, I don't know what we have left. Anyway, all LARPing aside, Hendricks is the slight favorite over Gastelum, -115 to -137. Gastelum +110 to -105. No, -110 even. +110 to -110. So big swings for Gastelum there on both sides. I am not comfortable betting on this fight.
Me neither. Too many questions.
It feels like both these guys hit too hard, and Gastelum, Hendricks' unwillingness to be cautious and Gastelum's complete willingness to be cautious also throw up a lot of weirdness. Like it should, that's what favors Hendricks, but it's also what causes problems in really trusting him to,
for sure,
not just get sparked. So it's not a fight I like to bet on. I do think that Hendricks should be favored, maybe even a little more than he is, but it just, like I say, I don't really like this fight because I feel like Gastelum's not quite ready for it still, and he's just going to keep getting pushed up into top 5 fights.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of forgot that Gastelum is still only 25 years old. He's very, very young. It feels like he's been around for a while now, but the guy should be being built up. He should be getting a chance to get into a groove with his new team at King's MMA, and instead, I mean, even Nate Marquardt is probably the right level for him if you're going to give him a test. But even Nate Marquardt is like a test for him at this stage, I think. He's beaten guys better than Nate Marquardt, but just give him some guys that are good matchups and then give him another Nate Marquardt, because he's proven twice now in pretty quick succession that he has issues staying disciplined, and he's not cut out for the elite just yet. So not that he couldn't do it again. I think he easily could have won either the Tyron Woodley or Neil Magny fights. Both of those felt like they could have gone either way, but the fact of the matter is that both times so far he has not. He has fallen short.
Yeah, and they could have gone either way because he's such a special physical talent.
Yeah.
Whereas he was getting very clearly technically outclassed in both fights.
It definitely felt like he lost in both fights to me.
Yeah. That brings us to Kat Zingano versus Julianna Peña. This may be the prelim main event. Actually, probably it will stay the prelim main event no matter what. If a fight gets bumped up, it'll probably be more likely to be Dillashaw, Assunção, or Hendricks, Gastelum, because they tend to lock in those prelim main event slots and not change them up at this point. That's like a feature. But the prelim main event, Kat Zingano, Julianna Peña, and I believe it's you. Yeah.
Well, to me, this fight is all about starting. It's all about who starts and who grabs the lead first. And I think that makes Julianna Peña a pretty obvious pick, even though this fight, with the two fighters so crazy and reckless and so hittable and so willing to throw down, this fight could absolutely go either way. Peña is the one more likely to start winning rounds off the bat. Kat Zingano has proven that she is either a slow starter or she's a slow starter pretending to start fast who gets instantly finished. Like, those are her options. When she fought Miesha Tate, she was getting hurt and beaten up by Miesha Tate and taken down early on. She got absolutely shit kicked by Amanda Nunes. She just does not have a good time early on in fights. And Peña is a very fast starter. She may not be quite as smooth in the early going, but she gets after her opponents like Diego Sanchez style. She presses the pace from the get-go, and she's comfortable doing that, even if she still does improve and adjust over the course of the fight. Zingano, her strengths are her strong areas are long range, where she can work her kicks and her punches, and the clinch, where she can work her knees. But most of the time for Zingano, when she works an opponent in the clinch, it's someone who is already hurt, or it's someone who is not that good of a grappler. And the clinch is precisely where Peña wants to be. And it's often not a very good idea to be lifting up your feet and trying to throw knees with someone who is in close, hitting you and trying to twist you down to the ground. And Peña is not a bad wrestler. She's actually probably one of the better wrestlers in this division. It's not a division with a lot of great wrestlers, but she's up there. She's got a takedown game that reminds me of Michael Chiesa's, her training partner. She has a lot of good twists and lifts and foot sweeps and trips that she can chain from one to the other. She doesn't have female MMA fighters' strange predilection for head and arm throws, which is great. She tends to work from actual strong clinch positions and controls really well on the ground after finishing them. And she does a lot of damage. She looks for submissions. She just kind of goes nuts for 15 minutes straight. And so, yeah, like I said, Zingano could win rounds 2 and 3. She could knock Peña out in the third round the way she did to Miesha Tate. She has a chance at every step of the way. But Peña is going to be the one who wins the first round. And if Peña wins the first round, all she needs is one more to win the fight. So I think it's got to be Peña.
I can't do it. I've thought about it. I wanted to, I on the round table, I know you guys both picked Peña, and I was like, can I? And I can't. I can't. Maybe it's just I'm a long-term doubter. Like somebody said the other day on Twitter, they're like, Kat Zingano, no, maybe it was on the round table. It's like Kat Zingano has, her career has been built out of like
Jordan Breen.
A lot of her career highlights have been built out of overwhelming, like physically inferior competition.
Jordan Breen said that, yeah.
Yeah, Jordan Breen said that. And that is Julianna Peña to a T.
That's kind of anyone who wins in this division.
It is kind of anyone who wins in this division.
If they fight people on their level, they go win-loss, and then they fight the rest of women's bantamweight, which is just not very good.
And the thing with Kat Zingano is she hasn't gone win-loss. She lost to Ronda Rousey. True. Everybody else, Miesha Tate, Amanda Nunes, people her physical equal, she beat them.
Yeah.
And with, in Julianna Peña, we have somebody who lost to Sarah Morris, who is like the physical bottom end of that division, and who lost to Deanna Bennett, who's not bad, but she's not great.
Yep.
You know, Peña is, she's definitely like a physical beast, and she's not a bad wrestler. But it feels like her wins have come over either fighters who are, well, they've basically come over fighters who are incredibly willing to continually accept being on the bottom and not physically capable of doing anything from the guard. Now, to that extent, Kat Zingano is very willing to accept being on her back.
Yeah,
far more.
She's better than those women and more consistent, but the recklessness is why I picked against her.
She's the difference is, I would say, is that she's a better physical athlete than anyone that Julianna Peña has beat to date, including Jessica Eye.
For sure.
And she's also a much more aggressive and capably aggressive grappler because she's so much physically stronger than those women off her back. Like, she has the ability to throw up arm bars and triangles and things like that these other women just could not, because they were totally physically overmatched. And Peña is very willing to just wade straight into punches and get hit a lot. Just walk straight into them. And I can't trust it. Like, she could easily win this. I have no problem seeing her just take down Kat Zingano over and over and grind her out. It's been forever since Zingano last fought. It's been since her loss to Ronda Rousey in 2015, early last year. But I feel like this is going to be the final point where that Julianna Peña, where Julianna Peña getting by with the absolute bare minimum of technique and the maximum of physicality ends. I feel like this is the wall for that. Yeah,
it's like Paige Van Zandt losing to Rose Namajunas, except Namajunas, if she wasn't as good, you know, like not as consistent as Namajunas was in that fight. I can see that. To me, this does feel like the pick-a-mist fight on this card, because both these women are so hittable and so reckless and so wild at times, and so willing to engage with their opponent that it just feels like either of them could win the fight at any instant, or it could just be, it feels like it'll probably be a grueling battle with some really close rounds. So,
like, I don't see Peña getting the kind of mercy stoppages it felt like she's gotten in her Rakazi and Dudieva fights, where it's like there's just like, okay, you know what, we're done watching you punch this woman from top control. And, you know, it'll be much more like the Jessica Eye fight, or could be much more like the Eye fight, where we see a lot of, you know, a lot of takedowns, but also a lot of back and forth, like a lot less damage being dealt from top position while Peña's working her over. And I think that, I think that Zingano is much more capable of taking advantage of her opportunities on the feet than who is just so weirdly error prone.
Yeah.
So I'm picking Zingano. I realize that there's absolutely perfect arguments out there for Peña, but I'm picking Zingano.
And I perfectly understand that.
The odds on this fight, Julianna Peña is, in fact, the underdog, plus 158 down to plus 135. Kat Zingano, the favorite, minus 165 to minus 180. I wouldn't put any money on this fight. I don't like the odds. I actually think that you're right, that Peña probably deserves to be the favorite just on her power takedown game and Zingano's recklessness. But these odds, like, there's no sense here. There's no judging how this fight will end. There's no judging who's gonna win it. Like, it just feels incredibly difficult to predict.
It's unpredictable enough that you would need like some plus or minus 300 odds or wider to justify betting on it.
Exactly. Like, it just feels too difficult to figure out. And that brings us to our pay-per-view main card. Cain Velasquez versus Travis Browne starting out. And I'm very excited to see what Cain Velasquez looks like against not the very peak heavyweight or Antonio Silva of the division right now. Like, because the Antonio Silva we've seen of late, it's very clear now that Bigfoot, like, we don't know how meaningful those Bigfoot wins are. I guess the second one, they both came before Bigfoot's real slide.
Which also coincided with the TRT ban.
Yeah, which also coincided with the TRT ban. So they aren't like, it's not like they're not meaningful, but Bigfoot has always been this kind of weird figure in the heavyweight landscape where he's both a physical Goliath and yet not quite an elite heavyweight. Like, he's an elite heavyweight because he's a physical Goliath and this weird collection of other skills he had. Like, he had like a surprising amount of karate and judo.
Shotokan karate background. Yeah. But that makes sense, doesn't it? Like, we know there to be a point of diminishing returns for heavyweight size. And so, like, the more physically imposing, the likelier it is that you're not going to be as good. You're going to have other weaknesses.
So, like, all we've seen Cain Velasquez against is Junior Santos and Antonio Silva, and then one loss to Fabricio Verdum. And it was a weird, like, I don't want to dismiss it, but it was a weird circumstantial loss where Velasquez very clearly did not train or plan for the environment he was fighting in at all. And, you know, he still went out and got beat. Verdum put together a good game, you know, survived Cain early. It was a close fight, and then Verdum really turned around and put it on Cain. But I don't know what to expect out of Cain Velasquez now. You know? Like, we have seen that video of him hopping is still, like, so in my mind of his knees and his physical, like, his starts.
If anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, there's like a GIF out there. It's been on Reddit and stuff like that of Cain Velasquez's little warm-up routine, as his name is being called. And he kind of does a thing where he gets down and touches his hand to the ground and jumps up and does a little twirl. And they splice together like his last 5 fights of him doing that. And it is a marked decline in how comfortable he clearly is bending his knees.
The amount of explosion he gets.
Yeah, and being able to stand back up. Like, he has to, like, prop his hand by the end, where before he's, like, jumping around like a young man. It looks like a guy. He moves like Dan Henderson in the last example. Like a guy he looks like he's 20 years older in his movements than his body actually is.
Because everywhere else in this fight, Cain Velasquez should absolutely rule.
Oh, yeah.
He has a huge wrestling advantage, a decent striking advantage, and grappling advantages, just every advantage he needs. And especially just like the size shape advantage too. Browne being so tall and rangy and being like willing to throw, like Browne is very set up perfectly for like reactive takedowns to be hit by Velasquez in this fight. And not the kind where, like, not the Josh Barnett kind where you're getting lit up in the head with elbows.
Yeah. It's not like Cormier where he has to try and, like, get up under a really tall dude's crotch and lift him overhead. Like, Cain is all about good simple doubles, low attacks, and his single game is really good, and trips, things that work against tall guys really well.
And the moment that if he presses you against the cage, he is absolutely impossibly stifling. Like, he will, you know, he's a 245-pound dude that can just, like, chain ride you from, like, just on your back, even if he's not taking you down, but just absolutely just stay on you positionally while pot-shotting you over and over and over again and wearing you down. So I absolutely expect Cain Velasquez to win, but the question is just, like, how good does he look doing it? Is it possible he looks bad enough or tentative enough at any point that Browne can land some one-off huge crazy thing, or just melon baller his eyes enough and, you know, get in there to change the fight? which I think would probably just make Cain mad. But I can't pick Browne. I won't pick Browne, but all my interest in here is seeing how does Cain Velasquez look with proper preparation in place and not fighting one of the very 2 or 3 most elite fighters in the division.
I think I made some joke about Browne's fingers being unfairly replaced with melon ballers before his fight with Matt Mitrione.
That's where I copped that.
Oh, did I say that? Okay. See, I was looking at my Sherdog preview. I was like, did I say it, Matt? And they edited it out.
Patrick said it on Twitter, so maybe he copped it from you on Sherdog, or you copped it from him, but probably he copped it from you.
Who knows? We're all dirty plagiarists.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to say right up front that I have a weird feeling that Travis Browne could knock Cain Velasquez out with some weird shit. We don't know how Cain Velasquez is. He is very, very clearly, more so than I think any other fighter I can think of right now, physically declining from one fight to the next. The dude has had an absolutely stupid training regimen over the course of his MMA career. The video of him with his, what's that strength coach's name?
I don't know. I know exactly what you're talking about, though. The leg press video, right?
Oh God, yeah. He's doing like the leg extensions, and he's doing it with like a maximal weight for 100 reps, rapid fire, no pause, nothing. He's doing bodybuilder workouts that focus on a specific muscle, not a muscle group, but a specific muscle, and he's just blasting it out to fatigue. Which is stupid. There's no reason for a wrestler to do that. And then you add the fact that he was a lifelong wrestler. He was a career wrestler. And that just tends to be a background that has guys coming in with more injuries regardless. You know, the guys who do a lot of grappling, that's where you get your torn knees and your shoulder injuries and all that stuff. And so Travis Browne hits really hard, and he's really big. And he has finished guys before with big one-off shots. Big uppercuts against guys like Schaub and Mitrione, the kicks against guys like Alistair Overeem, big left hooks like against Andrei Arlovsky, which very nearly finished Arlovsky, even though Browne was in a tough spot. But stylistically, you are absolutely correct in saying that it is, by all other stretches of the imagination, it's Cain Velasquez's fight. He's more aggressive. He's a far better wrestler. He is brutal from top position like no one Travis Browne has ever faced. Even aging, he has better stamina than Travis Browne, who has never been very good past the first round. He gets a lot of talk about his athleticism because he's springy and he moves, but even being more efficient now, that athleticism is not the kind that translates to stamina. He does not have good cardio, not in the way that Cain does. And I mean, even in that loss to Verdum, Cain was very competitive early. It was a really tough back and forth fight in the early going, and people have sort of retrograded it to be a dominant win for Verdum, but it started off as a very tough fight back and forth. And that's the kind of fights that, you know, Cain has not lost to anyone like Travis Browne. Like the Gray Maynard pick, it would be a new low standard for Cain Velasquez's decline if he were to lose to Travis Browne. It would be a whole new low.
I remember watching that Fabricio Verdum fight too, and like 2 minutes into that fight, I was saying, Cain is fighting like he can't get tired.
Yes.
Like that is what, and that's why too. Like I'm not dismissing the win, but there is some truth to like he did not prepare or fight like he was at altitude.
All wins require both opportunism and opportunities. There has to be a guy who capitalizes and a guy who screws up. And Cain made some very notable screw-ups in that fight.
Because I was watching, I was like, you are fighting like altitude is not a reality. Like, we saw everybody on that card. There were people like throwing up after fights.
He trained like altitude was not a reality. Like, it's like his coaches told him, no, the elevation is a lot higher there. There's less oxygen. And Cain just thought they were making a joke. Like, he doesn't believe in elevation. That's how he fought.
Yeah, that was it, and it was, he paid for it. Like, so, you know, and not only that, obviously, like I say, Fabricio has this great, he had the perfect mix of skills for Cain in that he's notably tough and hard to hurt and incredibly dangerous on the ground. And so Cain Velasquez got into this thing where he was tiring himself out. and then, okay, I got to try and wrestle this guy, and I'm already exhausted, and I'm going to be a lot lazier positionally than normal. And Verdum just jumped on him and choked him out. And
yep.
It was both style and proper training and proper prep and fighting and all sorts of stuff. But that's why I say I have so many questions about what Velasquez looks like this time around.
And I think even that Cain Velasquez beats Travis Browne.
Oh, sure.
That's the thing.
Yeah. The guy who pours it on for a full round, bombing away. It's not like we have never seen Travis Browne get cracked and hurt.
No, and he's not going to keep a lot of volume out there. He's not going to measure his distance very well. Travis Browne is still mostly just like this one-off guy with weird, awkward defense and lots of, but not very effective movement. He just doesn't have a lot in his arsenal. To threaten a guy as good as Cain.
Training at Glendale can't give you any like feeling of like, oh, and he's going to be a lot better now.
No, it absolutely cannot. His style has definitely changed, and I didn't love it when he was a Jackson Winklejohn fighter either, but I still don't love it. You know, I'm still not blown away by what Travis Browne does in the cage.
Yep. All right, that brings us to José Aldo versus Frankie Edgar. And I'm going to let you lead on this one. Because I know you are going to. I know you are just chomping at the bit.
Don't make me feel bad about my enthusiasm, Zane. I love this fight. I love it. I love it way more than I loved their first one. When I was like, back then, A, I didn't like Frankie Edgar. I hadn't learned to appreciate his style. And B, I was like, another fucking title fight for Frankie Edgar. Just get him out of the title picture. I don't want to see him in 5-rounders anymore. But now we have huge questions about where José Aldo sits as a fighter, where he can continue to go. And we have had a lot of questions answered about how Frankie Edgar can adapt to the new division. That was his first featherweight fight. And in part because Aldo is a big featherweight and a physically imposing fighter, but also because he was just used to fighting a lightweight, Frankie Edgar approached that fight with the style he had used against guys like Ben Henderson and Gray Maynard. He moved around a ton. He didn't really commit to anything. He tried to look for like reactive takedowns and counter takedowns to Aldo's kicks. And he landed at a fairly good clip later in the fight, but just couldn't do enough damage to Aldo because he hadn't grown that style yet. And with a couple of growing pains along the way, Frankie Edgar has really turned into a featherweight's featherweight. He knows now that because he doesn't have such a huge size disadvantage to his opponents, that he can afford to plant his feet a little more. He can afford to stand a little closer. He can afford to actually control you from top position and to actually hold you in the clinch and do damage. Normally, the lighter weight classes are where it's harder to hold people down, but because Frankie was so small at 155, 145 is the place where he actually gets to wrestle guys. He's not just scrambling with them. He gets to pin them on their backs and sit in half guard and beat them up. And it's made him look like a lot more dangerous kind of fighter. I can't pick him based on the notion that Aldo is going to be the same guy. And I'm going to go with that notion because it's basically just, do I like Aldo enough to believe in him or not? Because there's no reason to believe, no concrete evidence to believe that Aldo won't respond as well to this loss as he did to his first loss. And there's no concrete evidence to believe that Aldo won't be completely destroyed by being knocked out by the last guy he ever wanted to knock him out. So in embarrassing fashion, in 13 seconds, never having gotten anything going. So I'm going to assume that Aldo is something like the same guy, maybe a little more aggressive because he wants to get it back, maybe cautious, who knows, but still the same skill set, same level of durability and all that. And so how effective is a game plan that relies on taking a guy down and holding him down or standing in the pocket and countering him? How effective is that against the greatest defensive fighter in MMA?
There it is.
But really, like, who has better who has better striking defense than José Aldo? Who has better takedown defense? Maybe Renan Barão, but José Aldo has fought a who's who of wrestlers and very rarely been taken down and pretty much never held down except for with some weird extenuating circumstances in some of his older fights. And I think he's consistently gotten better and more technical in each of those areas. The first Frankie Edgar fight was the debut, really, of the José Aldo jab in the form that we currently know it. that was the first fight where he was like, oh, I'm a distance control fighter. I can make you jump with this stiff jab and set up counters off of it. That's kind of his thing now. Even more than the leg kick guy, José Aldo is the jab guy. And, you know, getting better in that regard, it's tough to see the first fight going the other way. I do think that fight was a lot closer to a dominant shutout win for Aldo than it was for a close win for Edgar, even though Edgar had his good moments in all of the last 3 rounds. He was never able to do something more convincing than Aldo. And while this time he may be sitting down on his strikes more, and that may make the fight more intense, I still do have faith in Aldo's ability to be a retaliatory fighter, to respond to his opponent's offense in the right way. Now, there are questions. Edgar's very durable, and he's tough as nails too, more so, I think, than Chad Mendes. And so can Aldo scare off Frankie Edgar the way he scared off Chad Mendes? Can he force him to adjust the way he forced Mendes to adjust? Because if Aldo hadn't been able to force those changes out of Mendes, he probably would not have been able to maintain that pace. Where Edgar definitely can. Even throwing harder punches and sitting down more, I think the fact that he moves less probably makes it so it balances out for Frankie. He can still go 5 hard rounds. So, yeah, I have my questions. I think it's more of a pick'em fight than last time because we don't know where Aldo is, and we don't yet know how Frankie's new style, his adjusted style, will match up with Aldo. But given Aldo's striking defense, given his ability to respond and punish fighters for having an effect on him, given his takedown defense and his jiu-jitsu, I'm going to believe that he can still beat even the new version of Frankie Edgar.
Yeah, now I want to start out and say that is the logical, correct thing to think, and it all makes perfect sense, and that you make a very strong, believable case that if I were a betting man, I would absolutely bet on. You know, I would not bet against José Aldo in this fight. However, I have this gut feeling. I'm thinking with my guts, and that's never the best way to think, but sometimes you just have to. And my gut is telling me that I'm really a little worried about José Aldo. Like,
you're not alone, Zane. This is what happens when I really, really like a fighter. I grow to have this affection as I watch each fight, and I'm like, man, they're so amazing, especially when they're underappreciated because I'm a dirty hipster. I'm like, no one loves them as much as they should, so I super love them. So then I watch their fights, and I just get anxious, man. I just see Frankie Edgar like knocking José Aldo out, and it tears me apart inside, Zane.
I really like José Aldo too, and I hate how badly Conor McGregor seems to have just totally eviscerated him. To pull an internet meme word, it feels like that Conor McGregor really pulled the John Oliver on José Aldo. Yeah. Like because the thing is, like, I guess part of the reason that I worry is that, José Aldo, why can't he bounce back as well from his first, like he did from his first loss? But that was a submission loss, and that was a submission loss where José Aldo was doing pretty good. He was obviously the better athlete, and he was facing a big, tough grappler who was able to kind of, jump on an opportunity and choke him out. And this Conor McGregor loss was just not that. It was just marching right into the teeth of the dragon and getting bit really, really, really hard.
Yeah. And I think José Aldo's a pretty proud guy.
Yeah.
I think he carried a lot of emotion into that McGregor fight. And while I don't think it was like the most stupid move he ever could have made, and I totally get why he wanted to impose himself early, he was very aggressive with the way he attacked in the opening minutes. And I can see José Aldo carrying the same emotion from the McGregor fight now, coupled with the emotion of the loss and trying to redeem himself against Frankie.
I just have this feeling like he might try to be the super exciting finisher of old. That is what I am seeing and thinking and feeling. And frankly, I love Jose Aldo's ability to dig deep and just like out horsepower anyone. I think that that's one of those amazing underrated skills he has, which we saw in the Chad Mendes fight, where he will just like, oh, you hit me, I'm going to hit you twice as hard. And unlike you, I'm not going to stop coming when I get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that that is the least technical and worst version of Jose Aldo over a long stretch.
And one of the most dangerous tacks to take against Frankie Edgar if you don't get those big shots that win the rounds.
Exactly. And my fear here is that he's just going to try and really just go out and put a stamp on Frankie Edgar, and it's not going to happen. He's going to suddenly get hit with more takedowns than he ever has, and successfully. Like, I feel like, there's this chance that he overextends himself and lets him get taken down, that he lets himself get roughed up, and that he lets himself get thrown off. And it could be, too, that one of those things where, like, because it's not like Frankie Edgar is a brilliant early finisher. That Chad Mendes strike aside, like, that really feels like a lightning strike. It's like, okay, we're not, Frankie Edgar's not just going to start cold cocking people left and right. So there is a chance that Aldo could come out, fight dumb, and have Edgar, like, put it on him for a few minutes, and then be like, okay, wait a minute. I need to reset because this is stupid and it's not working. And I need to go back to playing a smarter, safer, better game. So I feel like I should pick Jose Aldo because of that, but I don't know. I feel like I want to be daring. I want to be bold, and I want to go where the spirit takes me and say, Frankie Edgar, I want to take that gut feeling and say he wins it, even though other than Conor McGregor fans, I don't know that I hate any other fan base more than Frankie Edgar's.
Yeah. They're the worst.
They are the worst. They are the absolute worst.
They're the second worst.
They're the second worst because there's so few of them, and they are so vocal every time he wins a fight, and never again any other point. Like, it's when he wants a title shot or when he wins a fight, suddenly there's like 5,000 people that love Frankie Edgar more than life itself, and all the rest of the year, nobody cares.
Yep.
So, I don't know. I feel I'm riding with Frankie Edgar on this, and I just feel like it's going to be one of those situations where Jose Aldo is going to be trying to throw himself. He's going to be throwing himself out of a game that has functioned for years into something that doesn't work.
Yeah, into something he stopped using for a reason. I foresee the same thing you foresee, Zane, and that's why I'm so scared by this fight. But that's also why I love it so much.
Yeah, it'll be an awesome fight. It'll be great. I will be 0% surprised to see Jose Aldo just come out and put a clinic on Frankie Edgar again. Maybe have it be a close back and forth fight, but Jose Aldo edging clearly each round like he's done in so many fights before. No surprise. That's what I would bet on. But I just have a gut feeling.
If one guy's chin was going to crack, though, it should be Frankie Edgar's, right? Maybe. Frankie Edgar has absorbed so many shots. He's 34. Aldo's still only 29, and he's a fantastic defensive fighter. It should be Frankie's, but Frankie hasn't eaten the knockout punch yet, so you just have to be more scared for Aldo than for Frankie.
Yeah, it's just a weird fight. On that note, okay, this is worth betting on. Jose Aldo is the underdog to Frankie Edgar right now. Plus 100 to minus 110. Frankie Edgar minus 112 to minus 125 or minus 130. Jose Aldo at plus 100. Like,
yeah, even though I picked Aldo, that still makes me nervous though, because it does feel like a pick'em fight, and this is one of those times where I can't really accurately assess how good my analysis is.
Yeah,
because I have an emotional investment to these fighters, and it's one of those things where you can see so many bad things happening that it starts to cloud the likelihood of those things happening.
I just think that you have to, when you're playing the percentages with this fight, you have general non-finisher Frankie Edgar against Jose Aldo, and you're saying, I think Frankie Edgar is going to win rounds. off José Aldo consistently. I feel like at plus 100, that's probably like that's worth putting, like that's worth something for José Aldo. Like,
it's kind of like Mayweather Pacquiao, where I looked at that fight and I was like, I'm not sure which is better, Mayweather as such a Floyd Mayweather as such a tiny favorite, or Manny Pacquiao as a goddamn underdog. Like, is it better to get José Aldo as an underdog, or is it better to get Frankie Edgar, one of the winningest and toughest fighters in the organization, as barely a favorite at all? Like, you get great cheap odds on both guys. But I do feel like, like Frankie knocked out Chad Mendes, but we now understand that maybe Chad Mendes isn't that durable.
Well, and we also, I mean, like I say, Frankie Edgar is not the kind of dude that just goes out there and hammers someone. Like, that happening does not suddenly mean that Frankie Edgar is knockout king.
He didn't even go out there and hammer Mendes. He landed one perfect counter. It's not like he swarmed him and like forced the knockout. Yeah.
So I don't trust Edgar to finish, and if I don't trust Edgar to finish, I don't trust Aldo to lose. I'm picking Edgar because I'm picking chaos and weirdness, but that's a gut pick. That's not my analysis pick.
Sure. Well, I think both of us are making gut picks one way or another. Tough fight to call.
It's true. That brings us to the women's bantamweight co-main event: Miesha Tate versus Amanda Nunes. And this, on the other hand, feels like a relatively simple fight for me to pick.
Mm-hmm.
Tate is tough as shit. If she, other than getting armbarred by Ronda Rousey in the first round once, and knocked out by Caitlin Young with a head kick in 2007 in her second pro fight, if Tate loses, she loses late. She loses to attrition. And that hasn't even happened lately. She's been on a 5-fight win streak that, other than a lackluster win over Rin Nakai, is over as good a fighters as you're going to find in the division. Jessica Ai, Sarah McMahon, Holly Holm, Liz Carmouche. And I don't actually like McMahon, Carmouche, or Ai all that much. But when you're getting into women's bantamweight, I don't like any of the fighters that much.
Yeah.
As separating themselves from the crowd. So consistently beating those mid-tier women's bantamweights and then beating Holly Holm, like it says a lot about where Tate still is. She's incredibly tough and durable. She knows how to change her game up. She knows what she needs to do in any round to win the fight. Like, she understands what's going on in the fight in front of her and how she needs to adjust and how she needs to approach that round, I think.
Yeah.
And Amanda Nunes is just going to go out like a house on fire and burn down in 7 minutes. And in a 5-round fight, you really can't pick that to win. Like, Valentina Shevchenko put it on Amanda Nunes in the 3rd round. And Shevchenko is not bad, but it's like, that's Amanda Nunes as a more powerful striker against somebody who's in her same strength and still fading, like getting the fight she wanted and still fading, still having a ton of trouble, still not being able to do all the things that she should have been able to do, and put that in against Tate. And I just see Tate winning. I mean, Nunes could catch her out with a big KO. That is the kind of thing that Nunes is capable of. But, I mean, even then, a lot of her KOs have come. Probably her most impressive pure KO. I don't know. She's knocked out some good people, but it just doesn't feel like she doesn't have necessarily the consistency that even makes me trust her to do that. Like, she can hurt somebody really badly, but then it's sort of like she goes wild and it either works or it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, since you did this before for Joe Lauzon in a essentially irrelevant but interesting fight at lightweight, we should do it now for Amanda Nunes in a title fight at women's bantamweight. Go through her statistics of her career, because I think it very clearly tells the story of her career. She has won 11 of her 12 wins by finish and won only one decision. That was the fight with Valentina Shevchenko, who is not good when she has to be aggressive and who nonetheless had a very good third round against Nunes, who basically did nothing but just eat shots and cover up and try to get away. She's lost 4 times. One of them was a decision, but mostly they've been late finishes. She's been finished in the second and third round in 3 of those fights and 1 first-round finish in her debut. So basically the story that we get from this and from watching her fights is that Amanda Nunes is very dangerous early. She is a good striker. She has good timing, and she's very powerful, and she's devastating from top position as well. Her ground and pound is savage. I mentioned that when we talked about the Kat Zingano fight, but that was a beating when she had Kat Zingano on her back. But she loses basically past the first round. Even against Shevchenko, who she had a good second round against, she got exactly the second round she wanted, and she was still done by round 3. There was very little resistance to what she wanted to do in the first 10 minutes of that fight, and it still gassed her out. So I don't know what it is about Amanda Nunes that makes her this way, that gives her such drastic problems with stamina, but that's one of Miesha Tate's greatest strengths. Stamina and the fact that Miesha, and this doesn't get talked about enough, she's a smart fighter, and she's a coachable fighter too. She's not so smart that she doesn't listen to her corner, but she's not, just because she can be hittable and gets into some sloppy fights sometimes, she's not dumb. She makes good strategic decisions in her fights, with the only exception being against Ronda Rousey, who really got under Miesha's skin and got her to fight emotionally. And her and Nunes seem to be fine. It's a normal fight for her, just like the home fight, very respectful. And so Miesha's going to go in there against an opponent who is more dangerous than Holm, but for far less time and is far less consistent, and who really falls into her style of weathering the early assault and winning late in the fight. Now, if anyone's going to knock out Miesha Tate in this day and age, Amanda Nunes has got to be near the top of that list. Tate is a little better defensively, but she's still kind of a liability in that area, especially early. She's kind of a slow starter who ramps up her activity over the course of a fight. But it's a 5-round fight, like you said. It's not easy to go in there and say, oh, the person who only wins in the first round is going to win. Because if she misses that one opportunity, then I think it's pretty much a done deal for her.
It's also worth noting that 2 of the 4 fighters, at least, probably the first one too, but 2 of the 4 fighters that have beat Amanda Nunes are notably worse athletes that tend to start slow than her. Like Alexis Davis and Sarah D'Aurelio. These women are, Davis is a very good technical fighter with a lot of different aspects to her game, but she's a much less powerful athlete than Amanda Nunes. And D'Aurelio is just kind of a suffocating grappler and certainly less athletic than Amanda Nunes, and not a better striker or wrestler or anything else, just a tough grappler.
Yeah.
And these are both slow starters, and that kind of plays even better for Tate, where it's like a lot of the fighters that end up losing to Nunes are people that come after her early and get caught coming in hard early. Whereas people who are willing to just wait her out, like, she's going to gas.
Just don't make stupid decisions, basically, against Nunes, and your chances of winning are pretty good.
Exactly. And I feel like Tate can do that. Tate's willing to sit back and be patient and be a little crafty and, sometimes start slow, but she, like we've said, she's coachable. She rarely makes terrible decisions.
And she usually, over the course of a fight, makes a lot of smart ones.
Yep. So it's really hard to pick against Miesha Tate there. That feels like a really solid title defense for her. The odds are she is favored -240 to -290. Amanda Nunes is the underdog +225 down to +185. And let's see, Miesha Tate by let's see. Come on, where is my... Yeah, Tate by submission is plus 145 as high as, which might be a solid bet. Like,
which odd was that?
Tate by submission.
I think if she wins, that's the most likely way. I mean, she could knock Nunes out, but Nunes is probably getting finished the moment this goes into a 4th or 5th round. And if Tate wins by submission more often than anything else.
Yep. So getting Tate by submission at plus 145, like, that might be...
I think that's a solid bet. Very solid.
Because I think the odds are short on Tate, but I don't necessarily think they're so short that, you know, at minus 240, it's a great, like, oh, you know, I mean, she might be a parlay kind of thing where you're like, okay, I can pretty much trust Tate winning and anchoring a parlay.
Mm-hmm.
But, of course, being one of the most trustworthy fights on this card, we know exactly what that tends to mean.
we have in discussing this ensured the fact that Tate will get knocked out 10 seconds into the first round.
Like, we're about to get to the main event, but if somebody were to ask me, what are the fights on this card that you most trust to go one way, like that you are really very sure of, they would be Sage Northcutt, Cain Velasquez, Miesha Tate.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 fighters that I most trust to win on this card, which means that is almost certain that one of them will lose.
They're all going to lose. Now that you've laid it out so clearly, they're all going to lose. Sage Northcutt's going to get armbarred with a flying armbar from Enrique Marin. Cain Velasquez is going to get elbowed to death, hanging on to Travis Browne's leg, and Miesha Tate's going to get sparked out with a right hand in the first 30 seconds. It's going to happen.
Yeah, it is. And that's like, but the thing is that I do know, I do feel sure now that at least one of them will lose.
Yeah.
And now we're just trying to figure out which one's it going to be. Where am I going to be totally shocked?
Which pick can I retcon before it all crumbles?
Yeah. Because like there will be one of those fights like on Sunday. We're going to be like, how the fuck I cannot believe that Cain Velasquez just lost to Travis Browne, you know?
It could have been Cormier Jones. Like, that could have been the one where it seemed sure and it didn't. That would have been the really satisfying upset, the really shocking one. That's a shame it's no longer an option.
There's also Dillashaw Assunção. I do expect Dillashaw to beat Assunção. I feel fairly sure of that, but because they've fought once before and there's like, it could very easily be a decision win. I don't feel like there's as much pure technical domination there.
Yeah. Even
though Dillashaw is incredibly good.
Yeah.
All right, that brings us to our main event: Brock Lesnar versus Mark Hunt. I believe you should take this away.
Am I right, Zane? Does it kind of feel like a letdown after all those fights?
Oh, you know what? I love freak fights so deeply that no.
Okay.
But I understand that. Like, I'm very happy with like huge, massive, showy cards, Dynamite style,
Sure.
New Year's Eve style, ending with some weird trash fight that you're just like, what the fuck is this? I have no idea. That's a little bit what this feels like, and I'm cool with that.
Okay. Yeah, I can feel that vibe. For me, it's like it is no replacement for Jones Cormier too.
No,
it is not.
It's
This one I feel is another fairly simple one in terms of what the dynamics are. Kind of like actually very similar to Tate Nunes, except that the fading
Balance
issue
power.
probably goes in the other direction. I think Mark Hunt doesn't have great stamina, but Mark Hunt is a very, very tough man. And Mark Hunt can fight when he's dead tired, where other people would go down and basically kind of accept the finish.
He carries his power into exhaustion, is
Yes.
what it is.
And past it almost. Like Mark Hunt entered did it go into the 5th round, his fight with Stipe Miocic? Or 4th? I'll find it real quick.
I want to say 4th, but it was
5th round, which is insane, knowing how that fight went. Mark Hunt came out in the 5th round of that fight looking to knock Stipe Miocic out. He didn't do it. He didn't really come close, but he was there trying to do it. And that is not Brock Lesnar's strong suit. Brock has gotten a lot of sometimes very undeserved shit for how he responds to being hit. People like think he's some kind of chicken or something. The guy is obviously very tough. He survived a hell of a beating from Shane Carwin and came back to beat him. He showed some real heart. But I think Brock is kind of, it's not that he's like afraid of being hit or something. I think he's kind of got a bit of Ronda Rousey in him. He's just kind of very, very full of bluster and confidence, and it saps really quickly. If he can survive, I don't think he's not durable either, because you don't take those shots from Shane.
Durable. That Brock Lesnar is exceptionally durable. People have got that totally wrong.
Yeah, he can definitely take a shot. I think it's his mentality that suffers, and not that he becomes scared, but just that he just kind of feels control of the fight slipping through his fingers once he gets hurt. Like, he doesn't feel like he's in charge of where the fight goes anymore. And maybe he's a bit of a bully, bit of a front runner, whatever you want to call it. It starts to escape him at that point. His confidence in the fight starts to escape him. And that to me is the clearest dynamic here, even clearer than the striker versus wrestler, because I think that flavors those two. That dynamic flavors the other one, because Brock Lesnar could totally get Mark Hunt down. Mark Hunt's got great takedown defense, and he's very good at scrambling back to his feet, especially in the first round. But Brock Lesnar is massive. You saw how big he looked at the weigh-in compared to Mark Hunt, and his top control is better than Stipe Miocic's. He is terrifyingly hard to get off from on top of you when you're on the ground. So he could do that and beat up Mark Hunt. And Mark Hunt could totally crack Brock Lesnar with an uppercut while he's going for a takedown, or with a counter left hook, or a long right hand, or anything, and send him reeling across the cage like Cain Velasquez did. The thing that the flavors that is the fact that Mark Hunt deals with the former better than Brock Lesnar deals with the latter. And so in a fight that I think is fairly close, I got to go with the guy who just stands a better chance of surviving things going wrong than the other guy. So for me, it's Mark Hunt. I think he's going to land some strikes on the feet. He may get taken down. It may be a first round finish, or he may get taken down and have to go into the second. But the fact of the matter is, Mark Hunt is just due to confidence and belief in his ability to win. And maybe that's down to style too. Brock Lesnar knows he needs to take you down and control you to beat you. Mark Hunt knows he has a puncher's chance all the time. He knows all it takes is a single instantaneous shot to the chin. So Mark Hunt, knowing that, he deals with the adversity better. He'll go into every round of this fight knowing that he is just one short step away from putting Brock Lesnar away. It's not something that Brock Lesnar can say for himself. So it's Mark Hunt by KO.
It should also be noted, for as terrifying and good as Brock Lesnar's top control has looked, Mark Hunt is probably the best scrambling heavyweight that Lesnar has. If Lesnar beats Hunt, Hunt would be the best scrambling heavyweight that Lesnar has beaten.
Probably, because Frank Mir accepted bottom position, and Shane Carwin was as big as Lesnar and got pinned when he did get taken down and was dead tired. So Mark Hunt is
then you have Randy Couture, who's like half his size.
Yeah.
And you have Heath Herring, who's also very much from that grappling, like old school heavyweight style, pride grappling. Yeah. We're big men who are going to work everything everywhere.
Yeah, I also didn't get to mention this on the round table, but I think it's worth noting that Mark Hunt is freakishly strong. Like, I think I would actually be surprised, even though it's Brock Lesnar, to see Brock Lesnar easily overpower Mark Hunt in the clinch or easily muscle him into a takedown. Mark Hunt is crazy powerful.
And I don't know if you've noticed, but he looks in fucking phenomenal shape.
He really does. Yeah.
Like, he looks in totally phenomenal shape for this fight.
Did you see the embedded video of him just being a skinny guy walking around being bewildered by things at the mall?
No, I didn't.
There's like some guy doing a coin trick, and then he shows Mark. He's like, "That's fucking unbelievable! You got to show me how to do that." And then he shows him the trick. He shows him how to do it, and it's got like a string involved. And he's like, "I thought it was magic, but it was bullshit." And he just leaves. He's so disappointed that it wasn't magic.
I love Mark Hunt forever and ever and ever.
He's so great.
He is amazing, and that's the big thing I think going for me here is that I love, like, Mark Hunt and Robbie Lawler are the two fighters that no matter what, I will always be rooting for them. Like, there's nothing that could happen with either of those guys where I will be like, no, I'm picking Carlos Condit over Robbie Lawler. I'm sorry. I love Robbie Lawler too much, and I have to. I will love Robbie Lawler forever. And Mark Hunt, I love Mark Hunt too much, and I will love him forever. But beyond that, I mean, just from the technical standpoint, I don't know how anybody trusts any part of Brock Lesnar's game right now. Like, I don't know how you do that. Like, I don't know how you trust his physicality. I don't know how you trust his wrestling. I don't know how you trust his top control. I don't know how you trust his mechanics. I don't know how you trust anything from somebody who has not fought professionally in 4.5 years.
Yeah, he looks in good shape. He's leaned down, and Brock was never as bad as his critics made him out to be, but it's a lot of assumptions to assume that 5 years removed from a sport that he ended looking pretty bad because of his illness and the quality of fighters he was forced to strike with. It's a lot of assumptions to make to think that he's going to come back and look the same.
Yeah, and so, like, that's a big thing for me, is just when guys are out. I mean, usually when guys are out 2 years, I'm like, fuck, I don't know. He could be, he could
we
be
just
anything.
said that about Assunção. We just said that about Raphael Assunção.
So when you're talking 4.5, like, the idea of picking Brock Lesnar based on this distant past or on his pro wrestling career, for Christ's sake, like, no, I have no idea. He could suddenly look like the most wooden, static fighter in the world, and I would not be shocked at all.
No.
He could look like a guy who has not spent a day in the last 4.5 years training. Like,
did he get a full training camp for this? It was announced 4 weeks ago. Did he have 8 weeks to train?
I'm pretty sure that he had a pretty good idea that he was going to be doing this back in April.
Okay.
So I think this is one of those things where, like, he started getting into camp. They were negotiating. They pretty much knew what this plan was. And then they announced it potentially late enough to get him into a 4-month exemption, or an exemption to the 4-month window.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. I don't think it'll matter that much, but I just, we know what Mark Hunt is. We know maybe Mark Hunt has lost a gear between his fast and slow punching. Like, he's lost the ability to change things up to really, like, fastball somebody out of nowhere. He's more just going to sit and find the big counters than he used to be able to, like, chop away with some low kicks and throw some, like, lazy punches, and you wouldn't be really watching out, and then bam, there's the uppercut and you're out. It's now more like, oh, I threw something sloppy and Mark Hunt hit that uppercut and now I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
That ability may be a little bit gone, but he's still just god-awfully difficult to take down and difficult to keep down once you get him down. And he hits hard enough to knock out anybody in one punch. And I can't pick Brock Lesnar over 5 rounds because of that, or even if it's only 3 rounds, I can't pick him over 3 rounds because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think Mark Hunt has to be the favorite here, of course, because of hype and because of fantasy, and maybe because reasonably Brock is just this. He's the Brock Ness monster. Like, there is this chance that he just comes out and swarms Hunt and beats the piss out of him, and we're all like, "Oh my God, the phenom! This freak of nature is back among us." That's maybe why the odds are as close as they are. Mark Hunt is 145 to -189, and Brock Lesnar is plus 153 to plus 115. Now, don't bet on heavyweight fights. I don't know how many times I have to fucking say this. I rarely ever like to see odds go over plus or minus 200 at heavyweight. This should be no exception. But minus 145 for Mark Hunt.
It's not bad. I know.
Bad. Well, how about this? What Mark Hunt wins inside the distance, even that's minus 139.
Just go KO. I mean, it's going to be KO. It would be insane if it was a submission or a decision.
Hunt wins by TKO. KO is minus 130. Like, you're not getting any better odds.
No.
Anywhere in there. So A straight bet, a small. In fact, you know what? Don't bet on heavyweight fights. Fuck it. I feel terrible about suggesting betting on Hunt at 145. I really do. Like, I can't, because I know there's every opportunity that Brock, I want to call him the Brock Ness monster. That's all I want to call him. But that Lesnar comes out there and just swarms Hunt. I don't see it happening. I don't think it should happen, but it could. It absolutely could.
The temptation is strong, though. Same as betting Roy Nelson over Derek Lewis. It's another fight where I'm like, man, there's something. Oh, wait, they weigh 260 pounds. Never mind.
Yeah. Do not bet on these dudes. These fights are always fucking weird. They really are. All right. On that note, I think we're going to wrap things up. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSime. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush, BUSCH. You can find both of us over at Bloody Elbow. If you're watching this video on YouTube, which pretty much have to be, it's only going up on YouTube, give it a like. That's a thumbs up. Subscribe to MMANation.com. That's DOTCOM. That's our YouTube channel. That's where you get all the latest Bloody Elbow shows, interviews, analysis, all that good stuff. We'll be doing a 6th round tonight. We'll be doing a 6th round tomorrow. I believe there'll be, obviously, it won't be with me, but there'll be a 6th round after UFC 200. We'll have Knuckle Up. We'll have all our shows and all that. And then we got a fight card coming next week, I believe. I'm trying to remember which one it is. It's, damn it. UFC 200 next week.
It's Lineker McDonald.
Lineker McDonald, the Sioux Falls card.
Which is madness. An amazing fight.
Yep. McDonald versus Lineker is going to be awesome. It's full of otherwise action fights. We'll be talking about that. Doing Care Don't Care, If I Did It, Vivisection, Prospectus, all our shows. So stay tuned. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.